Hello everyone and welcome to Virtual Balticon 54. This is the post-apocalyptic fashion do's and don'ts panel, which actually started out as a joke. We were doing training and we had joke panel topics that we were using, and I made the mistake of saying in front of the committee that this needed to be a real panel. And here we are. Pro tip, unless you want it to be a real panel, don't say that. Thankfully I did. But our panel description is we all thought the apocalypse would look like Mad Max, but now it resembles more of a continent-wide sleepover where we have to be reminded to wear pants. What would actual survivors need to wear and carry in a post-apocalyptic environment? How much of this is a question of circumstances and how much can be generalized? And I'm going to introduce myself first this time so I don't forget. I'm Jennifer Povey. I'm a writer of science fiction and fantasy, and I guess we all know what apocalypses feel like now, right? If my other wonderful panelists could introduce themselves and admit to why they're on this panel. Thomas?
So, hello, my name is Thomas Atkinson. I'm a master costumer. I've been making and wearing costumes, going to science fiction conventions since the early 1980s. The one post-apocalyptic outfit that I have in my wardrobe that I can think of that is unquestionably post-apocalyptic is also green. So I didn't want it didn't want it disappearing into my virtual background, so I'm not wearing that.
And I'm Don Sakers, science fiction and fantasy writer. I'm a retired librarian, so I know all about post-apocalyptic things. And I also write book reviews for Analog Magazine. And I just like post-apocalyptic crap. Oh, and we're married, so yes, that's why we're on the same screen.
And I'm Doug Warden, and I've been in going to conventions and hanging around with costumers and being in and out of different kinds of things from the early 1980s. As far as writing, not too much, but I have done other things with tarot and other kinds of things like that, involved with even how to use it in writing. But a fan of all the genres and known a lot of this kind of stuff with the costuming. So been background voices and also been involved with a third eye looking at what everybody else is doing. So that's what has brought me here.
Okay, so I'm going to start by asking my panelists if they can, for their favorite post-apocalyptic fashion don't. What have you seen done in literature or costuming, or even what you can just think of that you would absolutely not want to do after the apocalypse?
So my top post-apocalyptic fashion don't, and this also applies to historical fantasy and pseudo-medieval fantasy and whatnot, because I see this again and again. Don't leave the edges of your fabric unfinished. If you're living in a world where there is no television, you have a needle. Needles are small and easy to carry. And if you have an unfinished edge of fabric, you have thread, because you just unravel a strand of that fabric and you use that to sew up that unfinished edge of that fabric, because you have the time and you have the ability, and it makes your clothes last longer. So that's a little bit of a pet peeve, and that's my first post-apocalyptic fashion don't. So.
Don?
Well, mine is that if you have obvious survival gear, like if you have the really expensive parka or the fancy water bottles or anything like that, or the computers thing that fits on your arm and lets you access the web, hide it. Because if you don't, it won't be yours for much longer. So, throw a bathrobe over top of your fancy parka. Don't give temptation.
And mine would probably be one of those that you see the opposite of all the time, which would be actually clothing yourself, as opposed to leaving masses of areas open, because there's chemicals, there's
Radiation.
spores, there's things, there's bugs,
Diseases.
there's you name it, and leaving too much skin exposed,
Giant mutant mosquitoes.
major not thing to do in a post-apocalyptic thing, in my opinion.
That's a good one. I'm going to say mine is I've seen too many post-apocalyptic images of women wearing high heels.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Make them go away. You are not should not be chasing around after the apocalypse in heels.
Unless they know how to throw them as a boomerang.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
In which case they shouldn't be on your feet.
There's always like that hacker, that Asian hacker girl, I think she's Japanese, who has a full hacking kit in her platforms.
Wow.
Yeah.
For real.
But yeah, generally bad idea. Grates, unpaved surfaces, no.
So what do you people think is the most vital thing to have in your post-apocalyptic wardrobe? And it can depend on the kind of apocalypse. So I will take multiple answers here. I mean, for this apocalypse.
Yes. No, you go ahead.
Okay. So yes, this was a thing that I did not foresee about the apocalypse, is the fashionable face masks. And
That's all right. Don't worry about that.
upside down, yeah.
Same sort of thing.
But I did not foresee using up my mom's entire stash of quilt fabric that I inherited to make masks. But we just have, fashionable mask after fashionable mask. And let's see, this one gets a little washed out.
Yeah, that one's not showing up so well.
But
And one which I haven't seen, but just occurred to me now, would be a fast and easy mask, would be taking any long sleeved shirt and just hacking off an arm and stretching it around and tying it.
Yeah.
yes, pieces of t-shirts, the leg part of an old sock, wash that off and
Which I have used.
yeah.
I have used the top of a sock cut off so that I could carry it in my pocket for the express purpose of opening doors at work, which had stupid handles, which you couldn't, you could just elbow them open, but you had to pull them to get them open from the other side. And I could take the sock and put it around and put it down. Now, why was that safer than just a cloth? Because the inside was the only thing touching the surface.
Oh, that's a good idea. That's actually a good idea.
So you always knew when you took it out that you were only touching the outside, and that what you were touching bad was on the inside.
Well, that's like when you're wearing gloves, you don't want to take your gloves off by doing this. You
Right.
want to under and fold them inside out.
And
Except for my friend who always just pulls them off with his teeth.
and Don, the gloves I remember seeing recently, for I don't know if it was for dancing or what, but there were gloves that had LEDs. And I've now thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if your gloves had ultraviolet LED emission, that you could go sterilized and pick up something, sterilized and pick up something.
I think one of the key things to do with post-apocalyptic fashion, even more than in real life, is layers, because it's going to be very, very variable in terms of temperature, in terms of sunlight, in terms of what's trying to attack you. And at worst, if you have multiple layers, you can always take the top layer off and use it as a decoy.
And that is a very important thing, whether it's hot or cold. Layers have always been an insulating factor. And we've seen that even in the Wrath of Khan, we saw that. But we can see it also in that if somebody is grabbing at you, you also have something to shed, get free, which is extremely important.
And one thing a lot of people don't realize is that if the sun is very intense, you want to be wearing long sleeves.
Yeah.
Particularly at altitude when it's not, when you've got that very intense sunlight, but it's not that warm. After people get, I mean, I've gotten kind of sunburned myself from not covering myself at altitude. So I've learned that lesson.
Again, less skin showing, more coverage, post-apocalyptic, high society science fiction, show all the skin you want.
And that is a fashion thing. I mean, that's a fashion thing now. How impractical your clothing can be is a function of where you are in society and where your society is.
Yeah, I mean, look at the wives in Mad Max Fury Road.
Yeah. If you are rich enough to live somewhere that's fairly protected, then you can run around with more bearskin showing.
Absolutely.
Or if you have some kind of value that someone else protects you.
Yeah.
And there again, think Logan's Run.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, it's an obvious, you know, you're in a controlled atmosphere, you're in a clean space, you can be completely haphazard with your wardrobe, but not in a post-apocalyptic. And you should be able to show that in a costume. And that's when I was mentioning earlier to panelists that I was thinking about, if you're doing a costume, it's nice to show what period of time you are within a post-apocalyptic period. Are you deep enough in that city-states have formed, or are you just remembering the flash from the explosion? And again, as I mentioned earlier, or are you just sitting there in your pajamas with a towel because Hitchhikers is a post-apocalyptic movie?
Yeah. So post-apocalyptic movie that occurred to me as I was thinking about this panel, 1980s movie Night of the Comet.
Oh, I loved it.
Which the comet comes, it wipes out most of humanity, except for a small number of people who are kind of zombified, and an even smaller number of people who are protected enough that they're fine.
Yep.
But the story focuses on it was the 1980s, so it's Valley Girls in after the apocalypse. And so what do? They go to the mall, and they're trying on outfits, and the one says, oh, which one of these do you like? And the other one says, oh, that one, definitely. It'll stay in style longer. And we are science fiction fans. We think about these sorts of things in advance. So we know that we can make our own style. And if you like that outfit and it's after the apocalypse, you decide whether it stays in style longer. So now I see a question from the audience that I feel like I want to address.
Okay.
Where is all this cloth and needles coming from if the world is...
I appear to have
a
technical problem. Let me see if I can resolve it.
Yeah, we would ask folks not to put your questions in comments, but if you can click on the little Q&A button.
Right, I'm not seeing anything in Q&A.
Yeah, it's
in the chat.
The chat.
Oh yeah, I see. Yeah.
But anyway, where are all these fabric and needles coming from?
Yeah, and of course the world right now has a great surplus of fabric and clothing, and articles have been written about donating your own clothes to the poor, and nobody wants them because the surplus is so great. And as for needles, if you've got a fish bone, if you've got a splinter of maybe not wood, depends on the wood, I guess, but needles are small, and if you find one, you hang on to it. You put it in the hem of one of your garments, and that's something that that's a valuable small thing that you can carry with you easily.
And there are more ways to weave. You can even take a piece of fabric or thread around something and pull it through when you don't have an actual needle. So you could create something that would work to drag it through or push it through. That's necessity, that, mother of invention.
But
And
needles are
requires
very old. Needles have been around a while. Sorry.
Say again, Jennifer?
Say needles are very old.
Yes.
And I wanted to mention crochet and knitting. And crochet requires a specialized hook, but you can knit with any 2 sticks.
Or
maybe
bone.
Not as well as nice knitting needles, but you can knit with your fingers if necessary.
Yep. And that aside too, just talking about, doing it work in a costume, I think it's nice to be able to show maybe, if you could give that detail and say how you feel, where you were in that period and how you felt that this was created. Was it scavenged parts, or was it something that you wove out of materials, and what were those materials? It depends on how far along you are within that kind of period.
Yeah.
And you should be able to show that though in the costume and indicate that, so that can become part of it. And I think it would be important to me to make that somehow obvious, so it would be visually something somebody could see and say, oh, I get where that would have come from, or how long you would have been in that period without being explained. It would be nice if the costume would show that.
Yeah, the how patchwork is your outfit.
Yeah.
Is it a garment that is worn and perhaps has been repurposed, or is it a garment that's obviously made of scraps of other things?
And we have a follow-up. So here, which says, so that assumes you are close to the apocalyptic event. Fabric degrades over time. So say 250 years go by. So I guess, how do we rebuild cloth making after the apocalypse?
Yeah, and fiber arts, fiber technology are among the oldest in humanity. And I would expect those things to be rediscovered, and someone mentioned medieval reenactors, but there are plenty of folks now who are keeping the old spinning and weaving and knitting and whatnot alive. And by the time 250 years have gone by, I don't even know if it would have to be a hell of an apocalypse for the society to be post-apocalyptic at that point. It would be
restarted in another form.
You'd have at least some form of civilization, because we've had minor apocalypses in the past. The destruction of the Minoan civilization comes to mind. Most apocalypses are, and the other thing is, most apocalypses are local. Global apocalypses are actually pretty hard to actually have happen.
Yeah.
And as much as we joke about this being an apocalypse, it's a fairly shallow one. It's global, but
it's a plague.
It's
kind of a mini apocalypse.
Yes, it's a vacation.
Yeah. It's not really an apocalypse. It's a plague.
But what you were talking about, Thomas, with the patchwork, I think that would there would be a kind of a bell curve thing where there would be a maximum point at which your clothes were most patched, and then local industry would be starting up, and you'd be able to get larger pieces of cloth, and so your patches would slowly go away as you got further and further into the after time.
And it's worth pointing out, because it might be relevant from a writing perspective, there are animals other than sheep that provide wool.
Including, I was just thinking there were plenty of rats.
Including rabbits, which are a great source of meat and wool and can be kept indoors in your bunker. Just saying.
And have tiny little bones that you can use as needles.
Yes.
Yes.
Not that I would ever have done that.
So I have two questions. I'm going to jump to the one from Pavlina because that's a good follow-up, and then come back to Nikhil. And animal skins and furs. Leather.
Yes. Yes.
Actually requires a lot of materials when you're talking about weaving fabric. You need less around in a way to do it than leather to some degree, because you've got to cure the leather, you've got to preserve the leather. There's a lot more involved with that would indicate to me that you've had some kind of a stable position that you've held. And I would think that's coming out of a post-apocalyptic and not really in, if you're wearing a raw hide that you've just shedded, you're going to have to get rid of all the vermin and things after you for the smell and everything else. I think it's not as post-apocalyptic as we might think of it. I think that's actually more very early civilization rebuilding. What do you think, guys?
I'm trying to think of what I know about leather work, turning hides into leather, and that's
Tanning. I mean,
yeah,
you've got to stay in its place for a long time.
Yeah, it can't be as simple as just pee on it for a while and then it'll be but which usually works with most post-apocalyptic problems. But yeah, I think you're right, Doug. I think having like usable fur and hides is
if you just dry it in the sun, it becomes brittle and it's not, and it'd be more of a target.
Now, for all of your dead neighbors who are lying around, you can certainly use what they've got while the supply lasts.
And because it is post-apocalyptic, the idea again of where is all the fabric and everything, again at the 250 years or whatever, like Dawn and Tom said earlier, it's like Thomas was right about, by that point you're actually rebuilding a society. But when I was thinking about, there are pockets, again, if not everybody in the world is affected. Well, it would be nice to see, and we've seen that with like City in the Clouds types of situations. It would be nice to see where, does your outfit have pieces that reflect things that you created from other leftovers from another society?
Yeah.
But there are still people out there who have the full ensemble. Be nice to see like a walk-on pair where you could see, oh, those things came out of this, but they weren't utilized the same way.
Yeah.
I mean, I made a belt years ago, and costumers do this all the time. I had leftover pieces from, they were roundish with lots of slits on either side, and they came out of some kind of electrical boxes that basically you didn't need all these parts all the time. And I wove through them with some other plastic straps and created a belt. But it had metal around it. So it's like also, reutilization, I think is nice to see. Recycling. How do you recycle the things that are around you and create new things from them? I think is a very important factor.
Odd that you should mention that.
Yes, that's a good cue for my pop top chainmail.
Yes.
Awesome.
And this is
awesome, Tom.
This is chainmail made from aluminum pop tops. And again, as with knitting and crochet, this is a little bit fussy and a little bit tedious, and it's just something you can use to while away those idle hours after electricity and television.
Which real chainmail is not fussy or anything like that.
I actually had a classmate in college, my degree's in archaeology, who would sit in the back of lectures knitting chainmail.
Nice.
Yeah.
By her hands while she listened. So we have a question from Nikhil, which may be an answer in chat later. Look it up and answer in chat later. They're asking, what are some good resources to learn about fabric with a view to connecting it to environment, etc.? So we don't have anything off the top of our heads. That may be an answer in chat later, or
I would
the other
have to
costumers.
look it up. I know a lady who sells clothing at the Maryland Renaissance Festival, and it's all hand woven on authentic, historically accurate looms. And not all of her stuff is like this, but every now and then she goes crazy and grows a field of flax and harvests her own flax and goes through all the steps that you have to do to get usable fiber out of flax, and spins it into yarn and weaves it into cloth. And nobody can afford that because it is so labor intensive.
Well, it sounds to me like this is probably the origin of the phrase, the living would envy the dead.
Okay, so my next question was about repurposing things, which we already kind of touched on. We joked about you can't shop after the apocalypse.
Yeah, well, you can't shop, but you can break in. I think, again, like with the patchwork thing, I think there would be an immediate period of lots of repurposing.
Yes.
Of existing stuff, and then as that wore out and wasn't replaced, you'd probably get it would be interesting to see in, say, 100 years what kind of fashions you would have that mimicked, say, duct tape or something like that you could have gotten earlier. And after that, people said, well, we just want it to look the same so that everybody will think you have duct tape, even if you don't.
That's a great comment. I love that.
It's my secret belief that duct tape would be more valuable than gold after the apocalypse.
What else do you think would be really valuable after the apocalypse?
So this was something that I thought of earlier, because I've seen this come up more than once in post-apocalyptic fiction, eyeglasses.
Yeah.
Which in a functional civilization can find their way into the realm of fashion. But you have Burgess Meredith in the original Twilight Zone, who can finally do all the reading that he wants to, except that he breaks his glasses. And I think in one of the Mad Max movies, there was someone who had a lens and maybe a holder for his one lens that was the only thing between him and blindness, was this lens that he would hold up. And I can think of a few more examples.
And being an optician in real life,
yes,
I say to people all the time, I've given comments that it's occurred to me that all these documentaries that say, how did they make this small jewelry something, or that they were damn nearsighted people. They were like up here and able to focus. And William Tell was probably farsighted as all get out.
Yeah.
So, archers probably were farsighted, and all the jewelers and all the watchmakers and all of the fussy people that did illumination were nearsighted. And
I mean, they also used magnifiers. They also used magnifiers too.
Well, yes, but not, a lot of them were working, I can work under low light and count the ridges on my thumb. It's like, you can't beat that for certain detail.
Yeah, that's how I replaced the battery on an iPhone, by taking off my glasses and just an inch away.
So
yeah, unfortunately, when I take mine off, all that happens is that everything becomes incredibly blurry.
Well, if you have a high astigmatism or something.
I have a really high astigmatism.
But it could be shown also in a post-apocalyptic way how people recreate like their positions in a society, which was my point, is how they would re-enter the society. Are they going to be a fighter because they're brawny, or are they going to be somebody because they can have high accuracy at hitting something with an arrow from far away? It has to do with your persona, and that could have to do again with your costume. It'd be nice to also show these things. If you had lenses, or if you had a lens to pull out, or if you had mentioned that you were the one that could actually rework some electronic stuff really close when other people couldn't because their sight went, you know, the other way.
Jumping off on a completely different direction, but this just kind of, I would imagine in a post-apocalyptic civilization that there would be a lot more crutches, braces, you know, things to deal with imperfectly healed broken bones. You know, nowadays it's odd to see someone with crutches because they're healing, and then when they're healed, they throw them away. But not in a post-apocalyptic thing, you break your arm, and you may not ever be able to get that arm functioning perfectly again. So,
and for that matter, certain diseases that we have under control would combat, and polio comes to mind.
yes, yeah.
It even occurs to me that also in certain post-apocalyptic scenarios, if you've got a lot of population, you're going to have a lot more violence afterwards. But if your population was wiped out a lot more, you actually might have a much more civilized re-beginnings, or a much more friendly population, because they still have to populate. They still have to get together, and there might not be so many to do so. And that can make a big difference in how you're viewing your situation.
That's a good point.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things I'd like to touch on is how much, if we talk about the apocalypse, but there's lots of different kinds of apocalypse. There's the plague apocalypse.
Yeah, the point, yeah.
There's the gamma ray burst that blinds everyone apocalypse. There's the alien invasion apocalypse.
There's the global warming apocalypse, where everybody has to have waterproof clothing.
There's all sorts of things that can happen under the umbrella of apocalypse. How does that affect your fashion? Are there specific things for specific apocalypses that jump to mind as?
I have a slightly related story to that. Having grown up reading 1950s science fiction, I was astonished a few years ago when I realized that predictions that they made were absolutely true, because like right now, we routinely put on makeup to protect us from the horrible radiation outside. It's just that that horrible radiation is coming from the sun, not from the radioactive things.
Right.
But I think, you know, any kind of apocalypse that deals with leftover radiation, poisons, whatever, I think you'll see much more of a protective type garments. You know, always be ready to pull your hood over and hold your breath while you're dashing through the spores or whatever.
I think we're still getting a lot of comments, questions coming through the chat rather than the question and answer area.
That's perfectly all right.
Yeah, but I'm missing them though.
Yeah,
I have asked people to switch to the Q&A
I can't see them quickly.
you guys are very chatty, and so you are like scrolling off the top of our screens really quickly. If you have something you'd like us to address as a question, please use the Q&A button as much as you can.
We do have a question in the actual Q&A, which is maternity and nursing clothes.
Oh, yes.
And I don't know if anyone on this panel has done either.
I have. I'm the only one qualified, and I haven't.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether they're the best people to ask about this.
I would imagine that there would cease to be much of a distinction between regular clothes and maternity clothes, unless we keep up some kind of technology of birth control. So
I mean, the Victorians had maternity corsets.
Yeah.
Those were a thing. I mean, it's just a matter of cutting a little bit of extra, you know, fabric to make space.
I think there too, you might look back to, you know, your American Indians or other societies that we know of, and you might think back to those again. Dawn had mentioned in the panel earlier a very interesting subject about sailing ships in space and so forth, and whether you were really, why, you know, might want to ask yourself why you were specifically writing it in space rather than in the actual time period. Well, in this case, you might actually be saying it's like, well, what, you know, you have that database, you might, you know, it's still there if it's early enough. You might say, what did the earlier people do? I know I would be thinking, how did, you know, earlier people?
And I am absolutely sure that there are some SCA ladies out here who could who could in fact answer this question, because they have needed to design garb that still fits.
Yeah.
And swaddling clothes is still, you know, for babies is still swaddling clothes.
Yeah.
And it doesn't change because again, it's like more protection than we would do maybe today. Now, again, it just comes back to, again, the same thing, covering up, protecting,
and
you know.
And if you look at most medieval clothing that women wore on top, nursing wasn't a problem. You just pulled it down.
Yeah.
Pulled the titty out.
Mm-hmm.
Doug,
we only have specialist nursing bras because we wear bras.
Yeah. Doug, I really liked your point about the Native Americans, because things that we know about Native American culture are themselves from a post-apocalyptic culture.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And so.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's probably true in a lot of different cultures around the world. But
yeah.
In that.
But it's one that we can take close to home as right here. So, but it is something definitely that you would think back and you would think, but, you know, how did people do things? And it's like, sure, you'd be probably out looking for willow bark again to, you know, chew on for pain. I mean.
Okay, so another question. In a more violent type of apocalypse, what are your thoughts in terms of armor and small manageable weapons? How do we repurpose stuff to make armor and weapons if there are roving bands of bandits, roving bands of aliens, roving bands of killer robots or whatever?
So I'm thinking of what Doug said earlier about making the belt of the repurposed electronic parts.
Mm-hmm.
And we have plenty of metal objects. You know, I can go out to you know, I can go out to my driveway right now and find some old brake discs and whatnot that could easily be repurposed as armor pieces, although they'd be awfully heavy.
Well, a piston. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. And something that's been done in a post-apocalyptic stuff, but street signs.
Oh yes.
Are great big sheets of metal.
Huge and easily bent, but still protective.
Nice.
And I mean, a piston on a piston arm would make one hell of a flail.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we've got all of this stuff hanging around. I don't think there'd be a problem with creating. Now, when you talk about the, you know, the robots, now you're talking a little different. You have to at least assume at that point, if we're still around, that we still have some technology of our own at that point. So otherwise, we would get wiped out. I mean.
Yeah. It's a favorite B movie plot, and it never makes any sense how we beat them ever.
Yeah.
Well, again, unless you still have some pockets of technology somewhere.
Well, you can always whip out your laptop and program a virus that'll take them over. That's easy.
Which actually segues very nicely. We have a discussion point, because there's no question mark, but I'll take it. It all boils down to just how much manufacturing ability is retained. Manufacturing is pretty fragile if you think about it. Pre-manufacturing, everything was made completely by hand. All our current manufacturing is built upon previous models with improvements. Now it's almost completely computer controlled. What happens when there are no more computers?
There's still an awful lot of old technology out there.
I go in the direction of how would we mimic things, and one of the neatest thoughts that I had in terms of post-apocalyptic stuff was, what would a hand sewing technique look like if it was modeled on how a sewing machine works? You know, if all you've ever seen is sewing machines making sewing things, would you develop a way of doing it by hand that replicated that? And that could be really cool. And I'm thinking there would be lots of other things. You know, we go in and look at how the robots did it, or how, you know, how are the robots frozen in place right now, and try to reproduce that. And what mistakes would we make?
Also comes down to not what you can't do, but what can you do. So you just have to go with, you know, and you might sit there and actually think, I want to do this, but I want this to be in a situation where I didn't have the tools I'd have to do it. Now, what would I do? How would I do it? And see whether that would mean you're going to tie a lot of little knots, or you're going to do something else to get there. And it may reform how it looks. It may reform how it fits or drapes. But that would become, in essence, its own fashion and its own thing. But it's, again, necessity. And that's where man has always been, you know, necessity has always driven, you know, the recreation. So I think that would be still part of it, too.
And I will let Thomas finish.
Yes, while I have a 100-year-old treadle-operated sewing machine, that I rarely use, but it still works and can be used when the power goes out and like that. It's a rare sewing machine, even an electric or electronic sewing machine. It's a rare sewing machine that can't be cranked by hand.
That's interesting.
And
yeah,
even if it's tedious, even if you're turning that knob and just watching the needle go up and down, you can do that.
Slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah.
And I would just add that depending on the apocalypse, the nature of it and where it hits, there's an awful lot of old factory machines in various museums all over the world, many of which still work, especially if you can manage to find a way to generate steam.
Yeah.
I mean, I come from a textile area, and my family lives in a textile area, and
yes,
there are an awful lot of those steam textile machines are actually extant. And there were enough that you could use that as your prototype for rebuilding, but you need to find, so your priority would be to find some way to make steam.
And God bless you, Kathy Mix, who points out in comments that libraries
yes. Libraries become very, very valuable.
And that's where we're in a much better position than most post-apocalyptic civilizations in the past, because we have printing and we have widely distributed copies of things. You know, it's not going to be that the Library at Alexandria burns down and you lose Constantinople and then you've lost 9/10 of the history of the world. You know, any good public library is going to have a fair number of books in it that could be used for recreating a society. And if you can't get them from that branch, you can go like half a mile away and go to the next branch library and get them. So that's a good point. And the Mylar book covers make great, you know, rain gear.
Okay, yeah, this is a comment, but I'll read it because it's really good. My sister nursed her baby son in biking garb and satin garb with additional fabric covering a slit in front of her dress so her son was hidden under it.
Ooh.
That's a nice idea. I mean, of course, people back then weren't as stupid about hiding nursing as we kind of are in our society.
Yeah.
But normally I'd have dismissed that, but that was too good a comment not to read.
Yes. And that also makes me think of if you have little kids, you can keep them under your clothes. You know,
yeah,
skirts, kilts, baggy, outer gear of whatever kind. I was, one of the things I was thinking of was how would you go about, clothing your children, because everything you make for them takes 6 months to make, and by that time they've outgrown it.
And depending on where you are and again, in your post-apocalyptic period, clothing should also start to have some identity, but that can be used in two ways. You can be seen as separate from the crowd, but you can also use it to, get away by quickly switching and not looking like who everybody thought you looked like all the time.
Mm-hmm.
By shedding a layer or something, or a distinctive item that you would have put on, and thereby blending into a crowd again.
Mm-hmm.
And this leads me to something we haven't discussed when it comes to this turned into the recreating clothing panel, but I'm perfectly fine with that. We haven't brought up dyes.
Bugs and all sorts of things are out there. And SCA, again, I've known people locally who have made their own dyes for fabrics, from beetles, from plants. There's so many plants that you can get a lot of colors from. I don't think that would be as much of a problem, even as you might think.
I think of that as being a more further along toward recovering civilization type thing. I think at first your concern would be to have clothing.
Yeah.
And then once that kind of becomes sort of secure, then you start to worry about what it looks like.
Yeah.
But then I don't usually care what my clothes look like anyway. So.
But anywhere where you're actually, like I said, with the tanning, with leather, anywhere where you have to set up shop is less post-apocalyptic, because you have to, you can be, if you can be in a place for a long time safely, you're coming out of it.
Okay, we are at 2-minute warning, so I would like to have my panelists please give their closing statements, any other don'ts they can think of, anything. We got a little more serious than I intended, but it was fun.
Yes.
And any plugs they want to make for other panels, books, costumes. Thomas?
Let's see. The Balticon virtual masquerade is tonight, and I'm in it. So so watch and enjoy, and let me know how great I look. We're in the midst of an apocalypse. The world is changing around us. Pull the stuff out of your wardrobe that you never wear, and wear it. And even if it's only for an event like this, dress up, have fun while you can.
Yeah, what he said.
Okay.
Doug?
Well, the only thing I'm going to say is that even in a post-apocalyptic period, you can still have fashion. And I'll point out that my post-apocalyptic wardrobe today actually also still matches my background.
Yeah, that's disgusting.
It certainly does. And
so it's like, you still, you'll find that people will do these things automatically without thinking in many cases.
okay, and my last comment is, remember that fashionable and impractical clothing is a luxury that people after the apocalypse will not have. So that's my takeaway, and I will be in the virtual bar later.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you to my wonderful panelists. This was absolutely awesome. We had a lot of fun, and I think it is time to sign out.
Okay, there we go.
You guys rock.
Cool beans. Thanks. You guys are cool.